Yeah, I do hear the weed whacker.
Yeah, I might just go outside and ask him if he can pause for 30 minutes or so.
It's not overwhelming. I mean, we can hear you. So, yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We're just talking about technical stuff.
And green, we'll call it green noise.
Green noise, background noise. I think we're good. Well,
Okay.
yeah, people are just starting to log on. We're a couple minutes out, so we can just hang out for a couple minutes and then I'll officially begin. Thanks for joining us, everyone. It's great to hear where you're from. So if you'd like to put your location and say hello in the chat, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I think he knew, Mo, that you were on the Zoom call today. Go buzz the Radke place.
Right.
It always feels like that.
He's out there every week. Once a week, he's weed eating his grass down to almost golf course height.
Aloha, everyone. As you log on, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for noting in the chat where you're calling in from. And it's cool to see people from all over. And we'll get started in very shortly, just a minute. Wow. Anchorage, Minneapolis. Super. Well, I'm going to go ahead and just get started with the introduction. So I want to welcome everyone. Aloha. My name is Andrea Nandoskar. I'm the Education Program Manager at Historic Hawai Foundation. And for those new to the series this week, I want to thank you for joining us. This is the 38th Annual Experts Historic Preservation Lecture Series. The series is curated and co-sponsored by the UH School of Architecture's Historic Preservation Graduate Certificate Program and Historic Hawaii Foundation. This year's theme is Conserving Architecture, and today's presenters will provide a historical context for the Waikīkī War Memorial Natatorium and new steps toward its preservation. A reminder to everyone that we are recording this session and we'll be posting it on the HHF YouTube channel and the web event page later this afternoon or probably by tomorrow. Please put any questions that arise during the presentations into the chat, and we'll address those at the end of the session with our presenters. And we'd be grateful if you can please take a moment to complete the survey that will pop up when you log off. For those who may be new to Historic Hawaii Foundation, we are a statewide nonprofit and we help people save historic places. These are sites that tell the many layers of history in Hawaii, and we do this through education, advocacy, assistance, and protection of and for historic places. I'd now like to warmly welcome our series partner, Dr. William Chapman, Dean of the School of Architecture, University of Hawaii at Manoa, who will introduce today's presenters.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Aloha mai kako. It's really fun to be back with the experts at the Palace, which I actually oversaw for something like 28 years, and now am having a chance to come back. And always we want to thank Ralph Cam for taking over for several years and express our sense of loss at him no longer being with us. I want to credit Bill Murtaugh always, who was the founder of our feast, so to speak. And he started this back in 1986 when he was had come to be part-time running a historic preservation program. So I've been here now for 32 years, and I've taken over management of the preservation program again. It's wonderful to have us talking about the natatorium again. I think it was the first week on the job that I got this call from this woman I had yet to meet named Nancy Bannock. Many of you remembered Nancy, and she said, "What are you going to do about the natatorium?" Anybody who remembers her, she was quite an interesting character and a really avid and preservationist, and worked so hard. And it seems funny that would be 32 years ago now that voice came over the phone. And it's, for many of us, it seems like, yeah, when are we going to do something about the natatorium? So today's two speakers are going to, in fact, talk some to us about this and what is the status of the natatorium. And so let me introduce them both. They have very interesting resumes, and I feel I should read it this time because they do so much. So Mo Radke is the board president for the nonprofit organization Friends of the Natatorium. His interests are in community theater and, of course, the preservation of the natatorium. He's a 30-year Navy veteran, Class A PGA golf professional, and he owns and operates the Golf Academy at the Marine Corps Base in Kaneohe. He's a career development manager and works with Microsoft, helping veterans make the transition to military life. So for the last 13 years, Mo has also been chair of the Kaneohe Neighborhood Board and the Kaneohe Bay Regional Council. His background is in business and finance, an MBA in organizational change from HBU, and a BS in corporate training from Wayland Baptist University. Now, Jill, his wife, is a former student, an old friend, and so good to see her again. And we have to make a point of getting together some point, both of you, after this is over. But Jill researched and developed the Descendants Project for the natatorium, identifying numerous relatives and their stories, the names of which are inscribed on the natatorium site. Before starting Apuakea Communications, Jill was with Public Affairs Manager at Aulani, the Disney Resort, and Director of Communications at the Bishop Museum, and Director of Development of Historic Hawai Foundation. She's held leadership roles at Kaiser Permanente, Macmillan Publishing, and the USS Missouri Memorial Association. She holds a master's in business administration from Harvard University. I think we've all heard of that place, somewhere back east, and has a bachelor's degree from Indiana University with a background in journalism. And she has her preservation certificate from the University of Hawaii's Preservation Graduate Certificate Program in Preservation. So again, such a delight to have you both here. Really excited to hear about what's going on with the natatorium. So thank you, and I will fade my picture out and give it over to you two.
Thank you.
You're on. Oh my God. Oh, hi. Yeah. Okay. As Bill said, thanks very much for that great introduction. I'm the president of the Friends of the Natatorium. We are a grassroots organization of volunteers. These volunteers, like Nancy Bannock, forced us to form this nonprofit to advocate for the restoration of the Waikīkī War Memorial Natatorium. And it was built in 1927. Jill's going to cover a lot of that information, a lot of that ground. It was built by the Territory of Hawaii to honor the men and the women of Hawaii who served during the Great War. And many of you are familiar with some of the basics. And if not, Jill's going to bring you up to speed on those. So I'll just turn the floor over to her, and I'll just be changing the slides.
And one of the exciting things I love about this group is I get to talk about a couple of the things that I love to go on and on about, the history behind it, and the design. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. Mo is switching the slides for me. So if you see me do this, that's my sign to him that we need to switch the slides. So next one. All right. This will be the fastest lesson on World War I. It's just a refresher that it began in 1914. It was primarily in the European theater. The United States did not join until 1917. And then the war ended on November 11th, 1918. Next slide. But Hawaii was already feeling the effects of this World War. Going back just to the annexation several years before, the US military had been building all kinds of facilities on Hawaii. This is not even an exhaustive list. Camp McKinley was going on at Kapiolani Park. Fort Ruger, we had DeRussy, Kamehameha, all before World War I even started. Hawaii's contribution to World War I came in 4 different ways: humanitarian, community, the defense, and military. I'm going to go over some of these. First, financial and humanitarian aid. Hawaii was very active in participating in war bond campaigns and raised over $5 million for the US war effort. A significant amount of money was also donated to war relief efforts, with over $120,000 being raised for affected countries such as Belgium, France, and Poland. There was also a lot of community efforts centered around security issues, but food rationing. The cost of shipping went up. So we as a community had to stick together, behave differently. We had all kinds of campaigns. This one was the banana campaign. We had a lot of bananas here in Hawaii. So the community came together and came up with creative new ways to promote having bananas in all of your food. So this was, I believe, a baking contest. And this was such an effective campaign that the price of bananas went up in Hawaii. So they moved on to other things. There was a lot of volunteerism. There was knitting. There was the Daughter of Hawaiian Warriors knitted over 450 sweaters, and that's shown here in the center photo. We also had YMCA sewing garments. Even Queen Lily Okolani got into the action by making a Red Cross flag, and you see the presentation of that in the lower right-hand corner. Hawaii was heavily involved in the defense, though, and that started in 1914 as being a neutral port. The U.S. was not yet at war, so German ships sought shelter here in Honolulu Harbor to do repairs. Now, when the U.S. entered the war, those ships, and there were 8 German ships that were seized and they were recommissioned. This one here, the Geyer, was a German gunboat, and it was recommissioned under the U.S. flag as the Karl Schurz. Now, this ship sailed to the Atlantic in late 1917, and in 1918, while patrolling off the coast of North Carolina, it collided with a steamer and sank. So this ship that was once interned in Honolulu sank, taking one of the sons of Hawaii with her, and that was Mr. Manuel Gouveia Jr. Hawaii did not send most of its soldiers to the front lines in Europe, and that was a strategic decision made by the U.S. War Department for several reasons. First, Hawaii was a strategic location in the Pacific. We had lots of military bases, ships. It was an important port, and we needed all of the manpower we could get to defend that. And despite multiple appeals from the Hawaiian officials, the Hawaiian National Guard was not sent to France. They wanted to retain Hawaiian troops as a reserve force and keep them here. Another thing was that Hawaii's local economy relied heavily on plantation labor, and a large number of able-bodied men who were already enlisted in the National Guard would have significantly impacted sugar production and other industry. Hawaii was excluded from early drafts because they already had more than 1,900 enlistment credits, which exceeded its assigned quota for military service. The first draft call, okay, most moving ahead here.
Sorry,
okay, so we had a very successful draft recall, and so it was delayed. By the time mid-1918 came, the war was near its conclusion, so we did keep most of ours here at home. Okay. A few stories of some of the people who went abroad. One is Edward Canfield Fuller. He went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and when he graduated, he enlisted, or he got his commission in the U.S. Marines. He died with the 6th Marines in the Battle of Belleau Woods in 1918, and he was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Cross. Edward Hedeman was born in Hawaii in 1886. He attended Stanford, and he was a clerk at Castle & Cook. He died at Camp Dodge, Iowa, of influenza. Now, Alfred Castle, he was here in Hawaii most of the time. He did lead an expedition in 1918 with other volunteers from Hawaii to Russia. He served here as the General Field Director for the Red Cross, and he is the founder of the Hawaii chapter of the American Red Cross. So as 1918 brought a close to the end of the war, we began looking at how we were going to memorialize those who served and those who went abroad and those who died. Although most of our military service was here in Hawaii, not all of it was. And on a more sobering point about that, the realities of this war were grim. The Great War combined close trench warfare and new destructive weapons, which meant soldiers weren't shot. They were blown to fragments. There were no bodies to bury. So as a result, throughout the world, memorials, large and small, were built to remember those who served. Hawaii was included. And so we began our planning. It began in 1918 as the war was coming to a close, and it continued on until 1926. It started with the War Memorial Planning Committee, and we have lists of people here. And then if you click it again, and another general committee. Lots of meeting, lots of compromises, and lots of conversations to come up with the concept. And that concept had 3 primary criteria of what they wanted. Number 1, they wanted a swimming course because they wanted a living memorial that would benefit the living as well as the dead. They wanted a fitting tribute to the people who served, and they chose swimming because of all the avid swimmers who served in the Great War, both abroad and here in Hawaii. They were very specific about the location. They wanted it to be built on the former Irwin property. Next slide. The Irwin property had been left inactive for quite some time there. They considered all kinds of other properties, including next to the judicial building at off Punch Bowl, but everybody was agreed they wanted it located right on the water. They wanted swimming. They wanted the land here. That was their location. And then the third piece of it was they wanted it to be the men and women of Hawaii who served during the Great War. Everything else was delegated to a design committee. So to develop the design, they brought in Mulgart, who was a fellow of the AIA, and he supervised the construction, the budget, and the jury design. The jury competition started in 1922, and the jury included the governor of Hawaii, the mayor, and 3 architects nominated by the AIA, Maybeck, Lawrence, and Wilcox. They ran the design competition, and Louis Hobart of San Francisco was the winning, submitted the winning design. A little bit about Hobart. Oh, I see I have Louis. Yeah, okay. He was born in Missouri, but he is thought of as a San Francisco architect because that's where he did most of his work. He attended the University of California at Berkeley and the American Academy in Rome and studied the Beaux-Arts in Paris. He is known for a lot of his buildings in San Francisco, particularly rebuilding that city. And a couple of them are here, as well as the Federal Building in Portland, Oregon. So the design that was selected in 1922 was much more elaborate than what we have today. It included a large complex. It had bleachers on all four sides of the pool. And this was awarded because of its ability to blend in with Hawaii's tropical aesthetic while creating an enduring landmark. As so many things go, though, between 1922 and 1926, they realized, oh, that those beautiful plans didn't fit within the $250,000 budget that we have. And there was some back and forth, and they finally went back to Hobart and said, we need you to design something within this budget. And so he presented that, and you see that here. Some of the changes include going down to just one side of bleachers and a large deck that would accommodate wooden bleachers on those other three sides. It maintained its Beaux-Arts design. And with this design, they were ready to go to bid. Now, the bids went out in the beginning of 1927, and J.L. Cliff was the lowest bidder and therefore the winner of the construction. Now, note the time. Construction begins in February 1927, and they were in a very big hurry because in August of 1927, Hawaii was to be the host of the AAU Championship, which was going to be the biggest gathering of championship swimmer since the Olympics. So almost every day there was an article in the Star Bulletin and in the Advertiser about the progress of the Natatorium's construction. And here it begins. Here you see where they started on the beach, and in this photo, they are digging the first pylons in. And the pylons continue. Now, note the wall right there on the right. If you go to the Natatorium site and to Kaimana Beach, you're probably familiar with this wall. Note that there is almost no beach to the left of that. Next slide. And here they are continuing to build those pylons. Now, note that on the left, where they're starting to build, that's where the pool is going to go. To the right, where you see the people waiting in about knee-deep water, that's going to become the reflecting pools. If you forward a little bit more, you can see that continuing. Now, on the right, lower, you could see the steps, the concrete steps that are going to go into the reflecting pools, and you could see that pool basin being built. Note the pylons, and then the concrete structure is going to go over that. Next slide. And now here are those steps with the original reflecting pools. Now I'm sure you're asking yourself, where are these reflecting pools today? Right there, that is a parking lot. And on the other side, we have the volleyball court. These were drained. They actually weren't here very long, but those steps remain. And on the left there, we have the locker rooms. Now, the round arched windows correspond to those arcade openings and provide the locker rooms with ventilation and lighting. So now let's look a little bit more at the design and how it was finished up. The War Memorial Natatorium is reinforced concrete structure. It contains an open air 100 by 40 meter swimming pool, which is fed by ocean water. The decks are 20 feet wide with a 3-foot wall, 3-foot high wall on 3 sides. And on the 4th side, it's the concrete bleachers, 13 levels high that can accommodate 2,500 people. It also has a 3-platform diving board with 5, 7.5, and 10-meter dives. Now, the Beaux-Arts inspired noble entry with its triumphal arch flanked by 2 lesser round arches is one of the most beautiful parts of the Natatorium. design. It has the words, "The War Memorial," inscribed in its frieze. It's got elaborate sculpture and all of the things that you would expect from a Beaux-Arts building. It's got garlanded base. It's got 2 American eagles and the Hawaiian motto and seal in the center. And just as a side note, what you don't see on the memorial itself inscribed is the Roll of Honor. That was added about 4 years later in 1925. And that recognizes the men who lost their lives as part of the Great War. So they get most of the memorial done by August 24th, 1927, just in the nick of time for the AAU championships. Duke Kahanamoku's birthday is August the 24th, and he came in just for this occasion. He officially opened it with an exhibition. He dove in, swam across, and surfaced with applause and cheers, fitting of the father of modern surfing and the surfing legend. From there, the Natatorium became the international center of swimming, where Olympic trials were the Olympic trials were held and records were broken. And for over 40 years, it's the place where Hawaii learns how to swim and the community comes together. Next slide. During World War II, the Navy took it over and used it for training. In the late 1940s, they did some repairs, and these would be the last repairs and rehab the Natatorium would get until the 2000s. The Natatorium was added to the Hawaii State Register of Historic Places in 1973. In 1979, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. It's historic for its association with historical characters, its representation of Hawaii as the center of competitive swimming, and for its architectural significance. It was, of course, shuttered in the end of the 70s. It was 79. And in 2014, the National Trust for Historic Preservation added it to its National Treasure designation. And Mo is going to take it from there.
Okay. Great job, Jill. Round of applause. That's a lot of slide talking. So moving forward, some of you probably know the politics of the Natatorium. And honestly, it's really uninteresting and boring, the politics of the whole thing. And as far as that goes, Mayor Kirk Caldwell said, hey, show me the money and we'll build it. And that was the first time somebody had actually taken a step outside the box of, we don't even want to deal with this thing. Then Mayor Rick Blangiardi went a step further and says, I want this done because it's the right thing to do. And he got the ball rolling with some continued funding for the city's contractor to develop some new plans for a renewed natatorium. And the picture that you're looking at is a visual representation of what could be. So the Natatorium, as Jill had mentioned, was a gathering place, and it honored those who served in the Great War. Duke gave it gravitas when he opened the Natatorium and swam that first lap. The swimming viewed it as a sacred place. Volleyballers took over the former reflecting pools and created their gathering place of their own. And then we shared the experiences of other wars, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf Wars 1 and 2, the war against terrorism. And since then, millions have served and have died for their families and friends, their villages, towns, and cities, and their nation. And the last living World War I veteran passed in 2011. And we're fast losing the citizens from the greatest generation. And those of us that remain owe them. We owe for their sacrifices, the sacrifices their families made, and their legacies. And bringing the Natatorium to life once again serves to show the sons and daughters of Hawaii who decided to serve that we will remember them as well. So the approved plan is for an open flow design. And this allows water to flow in and out of the natatorium swim basin almost equal to the surrounding ocean water. And this solves the continual problem of water quality within the swim area. Then from this photo here, the green arrow shows the groin adjacent to Kaimana Beach, which when Jill was showing her pictures and asked you to note that wall there, that wall is further back from what you're looking at in this picture. And the reason Kaimana Beach exists is because of that groin with the green line. And that's the way the sand is kind of deposited there in the natural flow because of the way the natatorium sits. The red arrows are open flow, and they indicate an open flow with water going underneath that walk area, which preserves much of the original design as practical. Did I go? Natatorium.org. We have a vibrant web presence. We post updates, and we talk about the things that are about to happen. There's also a Friends of Natatorium Facebook page where you can see more current things. Every year, for example, on the Sunday before Memorial Day, we host a Memorial Day event on the lawn near the Pohaku with the 101 names. We have performances from local hula halau, military color guard, rifle team, speakers, and a laying of wreaths and leis and symbols to remember those who've served. And this event for this year will be May 25th, starting at 10 a.m. You're all invited to join. And of course, the Natatorium.org website has a donate button from which we'll humbly accept your tax deductible donations. And finally, this place matters. It matters to a lot of people. And you can see young and old in this picture of folks that came down one day just at a moment's notice. We wanted to take a picture with many folks as we could, and this is what happened. And we expect to see a lot of support going forward. And at this time, I will pause for questions and comments. I haven't had a chance to look at all at the chat.
I can help you a little bit there.
Sure. Mo, you can stop your screen share.
I will stop my screen share.
Thank you.
So we do have a question from Phyllis Hironaka about the boulder and the names. Is that boulder with the plaque still on site?
Yes, it's still there, accessible, and we placed lei and flowers for Veterans Day and Memorial Day.
Yeah, we get it's a gathering point for our Memorial Day event.
There was a dissertation written in American Studies several years ago by a guy named Brian Ireland, and he took this kind of position that the natatorium was essentially a kind of colonial memorial. But I had another student do research, and it looks to me about a third of the names, and Joe, you've done this research, seem to be Hawaiian names.
Yes. Yeah. By far.
So Hawaiians were involved. And did some of the 1st and 2nd Infantry go to France as well? Is that? I know that the Schofield Garrison.
Yeah, the garrisons, that were already placed here, so they were deployed, but those were not the Hawaii National Guard. The people who enlisted here mainly stayed here. If they had mainland roots or if they had roots to Canada, some of them volunteered to go that way. But if you enlisted here in Hawaii, you mostly stayed here in Hawaii.
And some of the ones that were deployed to France were in fact Hawaiians as well, right? Who had joined the U.S. military.
Some of them, yeah. And keep in mind that there are those who are listed, the 101 listed on the Roll of Honor. Those are those who passed away. Some of them actually died here of influenza. It's where they served. They weren't necessarily deployed. And in that you have a lot of Native Hawaiians. Yeah.
That would help explain that. I know that the people that were behind developing KMC over in Volcano were very upset by the war because they suddenly lost the garrison and the whole reason for being. And I know that they turned the Kilauea military camp into a Boy Scout camp for 2 years, I think, to try to have somebody there.
Yeah.
So.
I see a couple other questions there in the chat. The one question about the reflecting pools. I think they took them out and put them over at the state capitol.
That's not a joke. That's a joke, everybody.
Yeah, that's not those reflecting pools. They're very nice, and the spirit of the reflecting pools are very nice, but they're just not sustainable to have stagnant water in any pool that shallow because it just gets dirty and dank. So there's no plan to restore those reflecting pools. The pool itself, the natatorium water, and now will be the ocean water, that's going to be congruent as a reflecting pool, because swimming in there is one of the things that was really important by those the designers to have, the location, the swimming course of 100 meters, and representing the folks from World War I.
Michelle Huff had a question about why did they stop working on the building several years ago, I think it was.
Yeah, like I started, I think the politics is just, it's really boring and uninteresting, and to go over the politics, because it's politics, and it's just not worth the effort. So the reason they started to renovate was because they wanted to solve the problem of ocean water flow through the natatorium, because as Jill had said, it had always been a problem.
They did quite a bit of works on during Jeremy Harris's time. They did work on the barracks as well, right? I mean, not
yes,
the barracks, the bleachers.
The bleacher section, yeah.
They did, and then the seaside portion was halted due to a lawsuit that there were no saltwater pool rules for the natatorium, and then it took a long time for saltwater pool rules to be developed. And by the time that happened, the money was returned to the general fund, and all the restoration had stopped.
And if you're interested in seeing the exhaustive history of the wrangling, if you go to Historic Hawaii Foundation's website, historichawaii.org, they have a really comprehensive list with links to all of the issues and over the years between 1979 and basically present day.
I'm going to try to keep up with the questions to help you out a little here. Well, there was a question here about the what about Kamana Beach? And I do believe that some of the opposition to the work emanated from the Friends of Kamana Beach, who obviously thought that somehow the work on the natatorium would be disruptive, not so much that they would lose the beach, but there would be a construction site. And so for a period of time, it would be unusable. And I'm telling you that I know from having looked into it before. But it was unfortunate because there were other saltwater pools in Hawaii that were suddenly affected by this new ruling, like the one at Shangri-La could no longer be used because of this new ruling, which nobody had ever thought of. But to answer someone's question up above, there's a question about why did how did it not work well? And maybe you both could explain what the original in and out outlets were for the original design.
You want to do it? You want me to do it?
I'm going to greatly simplify, and if I don't cover it, let me know. Originally, in the original design, there were 4 tubes about this big, if you could see me, where the water was supposed to flow in and out. Well, pretty soon the sand starts accumulating on one side of that and starts filling those up. So their solution to it was to dredge the channel in the pool deeper, which of course didn't fix the circulation problems. So now that we're shifting, I'll let Mo talk about the modern design. It definitely addresses that, because now the flow is much more open. It's not dependent on these 4 tubes to allow water to flow in and out.
Yep.
Okay.
And so what will this is a question in the chat again. How will this affect the kind of surface and the wave action of the natatorium? Will you now have swells within the natatorium because of this?
Sometimes. Sometimes it's going to be very calm, just like the ocean water outside the natatorium is. Sometimes you're going to have a little bit of wave action. I think the engineers are talking about the groins are going to dissipate a lot of it, but still there may be some sloshy days, and there may be days with just like any other beach where they have the alerts for jellyfish. Uh, so it'll be a swimming venue, but it'll be a little bit safer than the outside. You're not going to have that much swell. You're not going to be swimming through waves.
I know I haven't seen this in the chat yet, but I've had people say to me, why can't we restore it to the original coastline? And I know the answer, but maybe you guys could share it better.
I can pull up that picture when they first started the construction. If you go to the natatorium and look to the right, you'll see rocky shoreline all the way down. And then if you go to the other side of the natatorium and look to the left, you'll see what Kaimana Beach was formed by, that groin of the natatorium. And then past that, going towards Outrigger and Elks, that's just rocky shoreline. And if you take that groin away or return the natatorium to the way it was, all you're going to have is rocky shoreline.
And as I understand, even some of that is fill, and that the original shoreline was much further toward Kapiolani Park.
I would venture to guess, and this is just a guess and partially my opinion, I think this is probably the most studied stretch of land on Oahu.
I think you're safe on saying that.
Dozens of every wave, motion, action. We know every single current that runs through there. They've tried everything, and returning to the original shoreline is not going to make anybody happy. It's going to destroy a lot of what has accumulated since it was built 100 years ago. So,
including like the New Otani Hotel and other places
that
are built in that space.
Yeah.
For those of you who are fans of reruns of Hawaii 5-0, there is a perfect scene where Dano chases somebody across the natatorium. I think actually Jack Lord actually chases somebody, and then he falls onto Kamana Beach, and then Dano runs over and he says the immortal lines, "Book 'em, Dano." So you got to see that. All there at the natatorium.
I'm looking at a couple of other comments in the chat that are talking about sea level rise, and in order to do anything around the coast, you have to get a permit. And sea level rise it's actually a thing. I'm not sure if that's the name of the permit, but that's the big consideration of the permit. Whatever you put there has to comport with what the projections are. So yes, that's being taken into consideration. Public-private project, funds from where? So that's a good question too, as there is another nonprofit organization called Natatorium Restoration. They're not accepting any funds yet, but the person who is establishing that is working in partner with us, the Friends of the Natatorium. We're just not really equipped to fundraise $30 to $40 million, which is what we're going to do for the city. So we're not looking for tax dollars. We're looking for private donations at that level.
Could you say who actually owns the natatorium now? I remember this may have changed. At one time it was state land. Yes. And then the city building, is that right?
Yeah. Going back to the history of it, Irwin somehow got fee simple land out of what was originally a neighborhood that was supposed to be, it was originally Crown land, and they turned it into the park, and then you're supposed to hold the properties. Well, this property fell into fee simple, and it was Irwin. So when when the territory bought it, that they actually bought it, so it's different from the Kapiolani Park for that reason. And then they, through legislation, turned over the management to the city county of Honolulu. So my final answer is it's state owned with city county managing it.
Yes. Okay. I think we answered the question about the studies. What would happen at the sand beach? Open flow. We talked about that.
Thank you, Andrea.
Is there a timeline for the plan? Yes. Although it's not as compressed as a February to August complete reconstruction, we're hoping to have some sort of public event in the Natatorium August 2027 to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the opening of the Natatorium. I don't expect it to be fully complete by then, but you never know. That's the hope.
I have a question of my own. I know there are saltwater pools elsewhere in the world. I guess mainly Australia. Is that right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
is there an association of saltwater pools? Because if you think about it for a moment, it is interesting because the speeds and everything for saltwater swimming are different from those for freshwater swimming. And so I'm curious if they still have saltwater international competitions or not.
I know the main competitions no longer allow saltwater qualifiers. Obviously, when the Natatorium opened, that was why we did the 100 meters. And there were a lot of records broken. I don't know if they're still.
I mean, you could have an alternative, right?
Yeah,
So
as an alternative.
vintage baseball or longboards surfing or what's the other forms of skiing, right? We could go back to saltwater records, right?
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely a great idea, and incorporate the Australian pools. I believe there's a there's a pool in San Francisco, isn't there?
There was. It had a pipe break, and in San Francisco you had to worry about more weather related issues. There is one in England, but they are primarily in Australia and other tropical climates.
I saw one in Ireland, but it wasn't a competitive pool. It was just a local pool, and the waves would actually break over it. And these poor little kids with their red hair and white skins were all blue jumping in and out of that water.
Yeah.
It's so cold.
Andrea, thanks for posting all of those links.
Someone was asking if you could share more about the Descendants Project, Joe.
Oh, okay. We do have a website. It's we'll send the link out. I thought we had the link.
I'll do it now.
I began this back in 2014, and it came out of my general interest in people and what they were doing and who the people were that are being remembered here. So it's been a lot of work down the genealogy trails to track some of them down. As I find things, I post the stories, and I do have quite a backlog that needs to go up. I hear from the descendants quite a bit, and I love to share their stories. The hardest part is, of course, to get the photos. I also love being at gatherings of friends, and I'll come across a name, and of course I think, oh, did you know you have your great grandfather was part of the World War I memorial? They don't know, so I love springing that on them. It's a great conversation piece. And another great thing is that DAGS has made the draft cards available. They digitized them, so I found a lot of information with that, and a lot of great stories have come out of that and connections.
Do you think a lot of the Native Hawaiian names, to clarify again, were probably in the 1st and 2nd Hawaiian Infantry and died of flu or injuries in Hawaii during the war period? Is that possibly part of it?
It's possibly part of it. What I found is most of the Native Hawaiians who are listed on the roll of honor probably died more of influenza the Spanish flu. There were a handful who were abroad, but they were like in Iowa at camps, things like that. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So can you explain to everybody why it's not a good idea to just fill it up with sand and turn it into a volleyball court? I've had so many people say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, logic, you'd think that would do, but sand is very heavy, and the pylons that were dug in and definitely the concrete enclosure, they're not built to hold sand. If you filled that with sand, the whole thing would collapse. It's built as one piece, and then the whole thing would go down. Then the beach erodes, goes right into the protected fishery just off Waikīkī. It's one of the last living coral patches in Waikīkī. So that's why it's not built to hold sand. It's not strong enough.
Thank you. There's a question from Andrea about has there been an oral history project on any of the descendants of people?
There hasn't. I think that would be a wonderful thing. Just the interviews that I've done, the stories we've collected, and we've had some speakers at the Memorial Day ceremony.
So Keith in the audience asks, would the organization be allowed to charge for the use of it as a way of helping to pay for it?
Hey, that's a great question. And it kind of depends on who the operator of a rehabilitated natatorium would be, whether it would be the Parks Department or whether it would be a nonprofit. If it was a nonprofit, I'm sure they would be charging for visitors. I think Kama'aina would be free. One of the things that the Friends of the Natatorium wants to stay involved with is the operation of the natatorium to make sure it still represents what it's there for. And one of those things is to be a reminder of those that have served, not just in World War I, because that was the original intent, but sometimes rehabilitation includes other things. And in this case, maybe representing all of the service members who have served from all wars from then until now. And then going back to the charge, having tourists have to pay a fee would be completely appropriate. The Friends of the Natatorium position would be free entry for Kama'aina.
Could you say something about, I know Nancy had helped to broker a deal with the Swimming Hall of Fame to have a separate branch here, and that there was actually part of the plan had a Swimming Hall of Fame in the locker room area, I think.
Sure. Yeah, that was right now one of the locker room areas. The Eva side of the natatorium is being used by water safety. It's one of the ocean safety. That's their division office. That's the perfect place for having a swimming hall of fame. Something you'd see similarly at the airport would be a more permanent display right there in that area, and perhaps concession, but that would not be the city's thing. That would be a nonprofit's thing if it went in that direction.
I think they have the main base, I think, is in Fort Lauderdale, the Swimming Hall of Fame. So
yeah.
Oddly, sort of like the War in the Pacific museum is located in Texas, which is too bad. I've always thought we should. But Nimitz is hometown.
Speaking of War in the Pacific, Historic Hawai Parks, they're the folks that operate the Pearl Harbor Memorial and Kalapapa on Molokai, and a couple of other venues further west towards Guam, Palau, Truk, in those War in the Pacific areas. They expressed an interest in operating the natatorium. So to have an organization that's already geared to do that sort of thing would be a big plus if that's the direction that it goes.
So Jonathan just has a question about does the buildup of sand on the Kamana Beach side, does that affect the stability of the building?
That's an engineering question, I think. I mean, based on Jill's answer, I think her answer was pushing sand this way. That's going from one side, and that sand is constantly sometimes come on a beach, just like any other flow is big, and sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's big. So there's a constant movement of sand in the area, and I don't think it's as big as a concern. But I'm not the engineer to answer that question. That's just my unengineering opinion.
Yeah.
But the project would be able to preserve Kaimana Beach, right? You wouldn't have to.
That's definitely the intent, is to. Kaimana is a great place. I mean, sometimes you don't want to sit on hard bleachers and swim in the pool. Sometimes you want the sand experience, and Kaimana is perfect for that. It's a great local beach.
Yeah.
And it's not Waikīkī.
People like my age, the contemporaries, many of them remember it as little kids going there. I guess Andrea was wondering if anybody listening in remembers going there to get their swimming lessons or anything. Anybody out there remember actually going there and swimming? It's quite interesting when I run into people and I'll say, "Oh, I remember going there. That's where I took swimming classes." It's been closed for so long, you kind of forget that, right? It's what, 79, right?
Yeah. I wasn't old enough to swim when it closed, so. And now I'm like not exactly a youngin', so you imagine what at least one generation now, almost 2 generations have grown up without knowing a natatorium to swim in.
And
go ahead.
If anyone's interested, and I was taking back a question about the oral history project. I started one, and it just kind of got it. It overwhelmed my ability to take the time to do it. But recently, Jim Becker, an AP reporter, passed away, and I had a chance to sit with him for an hour and a half. And I sat with some folks from the Napoleon family. And if anybody does want to pick up an oral history, I'd be glad to share those recordings with them.
I saw that Linnea Peterson just said she took lessons there from Coach Sakamaki when she was in junior high school. So,
which was that the coach Soichi Sakamoto?
Probably.
Oh, that guy's a legend.
Not Sakamoto. She said but she wrote it as Sakamaki.
That's cool.
He was the guy who trained the Olympic swimmers in the 40s in the sugarcane drainage ditches of Maui, and then worked his way over here.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive story.
Yeah.
I don't think you mentioned it, but there are other celebrities who swam there. I mean, all of the Olympians. Buster Crabbe, who was a local boy, went to Punahou. He's with a Hawaiian background, right? A Native Hawaiian background. He swam there, and Johnny Weissmuller. Both of those have something in common.
Yep.
I don't know if the audience knows, but they both played Tarzan at different times in their careers. And Duke Kahanamoku had a film career for a short time as well. He played in a number of movies.
Question from Andrea, very thoughtful. How can people support the Natatorium's preservation? Right now, we're accepting donations for the Natatorium. If you happen to know somebody who is interested in providing a donation closer to the hundreds and thousands of dollars, please reach out to us so we can get them connected with the fundraising arm of the Natatorium rehabilitation.
I had seen earlier city plans which somehow suggested they could move the arch to the park, which was really so sad because it would be a styrofoam arch that they would put stucco on, and it was not going to be the same at all. So those aren't good solutions.
Yeah, it's cinder block with cement plaster. It can't be moved.
And yes, Philip, the changing rooms were rehabbed during the landside restoration in 2004.
Are there any last questions? Thank you for the very robust discussion and questions in the chat.
I thank you both
Thank you.
jumping in on this and trying to make it happen. I think it's hugely important. I think there's some saying somewhere, someone wrote sometime, that the society can be viewed by the way it takes care of its past.
Yes.
And so I think this is a test of that. And all these other sorts of side issues, like we'll lose the beach, or we won't have parking while the work is going on, or it's just a colonial thing, nothing to do with Native Hawaiians. All these things are not really true. And so I think it's really a worthy project, and I hope we can save it.
Yeah.
Historic Hawaii Foundation's consistently played an important role. It was also, wasn't it one of the 11 most threatened places at one point too? So
It was.
Yes, it was. It was. I did put some links in the chat to the various pieces that you can piece together I tried to start with the oldest to the newest so you could see some of the progression and the history.
just think how great a thing it would be.
Yeah.
We have so little remaining in Waikiki of a more distant past, and it would be so terrific to have this back in use.
Yeah,
I agree.
You know, lose this, you lose the Royal Wine, you lose the Moana. What do you got? You know, nothing that ties us back to that earlier period.
Mhm.
Well, you can always get a Foot Locker at Hawaii Theater.
But not that. Last I remember, Hawaii Theater is not in Waikiki, but it's a kind of weird echo of the Waikiki Theater.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's a little weird echo of the Waikiki Theater there.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Shopping mall has a marquee or something.
I just wanted to thank Andrea and Kirsten and all the Historic Hawaii team, and Bill. Thank you for moderating and keeping us all on track. Thank you, Jill, for kicking me under the table when I misspoke. And I'm so happy that you did this and are doing this series, and I can't wait for the next series.
Thank you.
Next week we have Graham Hart talking about the preservation of our modern heritage, and we have quite a lot of that in Waikiki. So the post-World War II period. So
we do. Jill and Mo, thank you so much. It was really fascinating. I especially think the historical context was really helpful for people who may not know how it came to be the Natatorium. I also want to thank Michelle Kisik, my colleague, who's, as always, supporting the tech in the back. And yes, as Bill said last week, can you believe it? It's our last one for this year. Yeah, so Graham Hart will be here, and we encourage you to take the survey when you log off and send any questions or anything that you didn't get addressed, if you'd like, on to us, and we'll forward it. And it's great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bill, for your great moderation.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, we will see everyone next week with Graham Hart on conserving modernism. Same time, noon, and I think it's March 5th.
Great.
Same time, same place.
Same time. I'll be posting the recording that you can share as well. Aloha.
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 Ahui ho, everyone.
Ahui ho.